The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
I am Carl Seidel, and our guest today is Charlie Hall. Charlie, you're from the Republican Club too, and we're going to try to do a little bit of explaining to the people of how the election that's coming up this fall is supposed to be run.
Yep.
And you want to start off with some outline of what you want to tell the audience?
Yeah, so what happened in the 2020 election, some feedback from candidates and voters, and most recently in the municipal election, we compiled some of that information, and it was kind of across the board in Ward 7. Mm-hmm. And then we reached out to some of the other wards and asked those candidates, you know, what they learned through the door knocking process, greeting, you know, talking to voters and trying to get votes. And it wasn't really party specific, which was not surprising. But the information that we received clearly indicated that there's not a misunderstanding, but an issue around how do you actually register to vote? Mm-hmm. And once you vote, how do you choose candidates? And what are all these three elections about? Mm-hmm. So, and I know in some cases, you know, civics isn't taught the way it was taught when I was in school. Yeah. So we took that information and I took the action item to develop a series of modules that we're going to present through this TV medium. And hopefully the voters in Ward 7 and across Nashua, if they want to take a look at it, it encourages those people that are registered to vote to get out and vote. And those individuals who are not registered, it explains the process and how to go about doing it. Mm-hmm. And it'll allow them to exercise their constitutional right to vote in our free election. So that's the basic, and I'll just give you a brief rundown so people understand.
Okay, just a minute before you go into that, I want to tell our audience that we're going to try to have this thoroughly explained on TV here, but we're also going to put it on our website. Yep. That is NashuaGOP.org.
Okay.
Okay, yep, so that they can look up and look at the details if they don't catch on right away.
Yep.
Okay, and if they can call there if they have questions, we'll get back on and answer them. Yep. Okay.
So what I did was I put together an opening which kind of explains what we're doing, and there's an introduction. There's three modules. Module 1 covers the form of government, who can vote and why vote. Module 2 covers preparing to vote and choosing candidates. And then Module 3 is how and where to vote. And then the last piece of it is the closing, where it basically asks people, exercise your right, your constitutional right to vote. And if you're not registered, register to vote and cast your ballot and go ahead and make good choices and do what's best for your family and your community.
Well, can you talk about some of the problems you came across that people were confused or?
Yeah, so I think the biggest takeaway I got was people were reluctant to vote, even if they were a registered voter, because they weren't sure what candidates they wanted to vote for, and that was on either side of the fence. Mm-hmm. And it struck me as kind of odd because for me, I'm involved in it and I research the candidates and I make sure I choose the candidates that best support the values and the things that I believe in. And I also print out the sample ballot when it's available and I fill it out. Mm-hmm. And as many times I've been voting since I was 18 years old, and when I go to the polls, I bring it with me for a couple of reasons. One is I don't ever want to make a mistake, right? Because you can't withdraw that once it's in the machine. Right. And the other side of it is there are people there to vote that don't have much free time. They got families and children and obligations and everything. So you want to make it as efficient as possible. So
you're not taking too
yeah,
much of their
you're
time.
not wasting anybody's time or asking for another
Mm-hmm.
ballot because you made a mistake. So
That, you know something, that's one of the problems. When we do some recounting,
Yep.
you find out how many people make mistakes, they mark it all up, and they cancel their vote.
excellent point, because when we did the recount
Yeah.
of my election in 2020, you get to review all of the ballots
Right.
and pass judgment on whether the intent of the voter is really on the ballot.
Yeah,
And that was part of why I needed to do this, because and you can't tell which party they are. You don't know who did
that's
the
right.
vote.
Yeah,
But people that are voting need to make sure their vote counts and the ballot is filled out correctly. And there were a number of ballots where you looked at it and went, and both sides said, no, this is not a valid ballot. And there was always those contested ones. But
well, that's a part of the information you're going to give them, that they can choose to go and get a new ballot.
exactly, yeah. If you make a mistake, don't cast the ballot.
Right.
Go to the moderator and ask the moderator,
For a new
I've made a
ballot.
mistake, and they'll take the old one and give you a new one, and you get to start over.
Right.
And then it goes into the machine correct, the way you want it.
Right.
And it gets counted the way you want it. So that's the whole idea behind this. We're all under the umbrella of the Constitution, and citizens have a legal right to vote, and we should all cast our vote, because that's the process.
Good.
So that's how we.
Excuse my interruption, but I think
that's fine.
you're hitting some points that are really valuable to our audience.
Right. And I think part of this is some of the folks that we spoke with said, this whole voting thing, I get anxiety. This is meant to curtail that, because a well-informed voter chooses the right candidates, goes to the polls, and casts their ballot. And most people, if you take a look at everything in everybody's life, they do far more complicated things than voting.
Right.
So, my hope is people will take away something good from this and go, you know what? I'm going to vote. I'm a registered voter, and I'm going to do my homework and make sure I do it right. And those that aren't registered voters and are legal citizens and are domiciled in New Hampshire, they go to the town clerk's office and get themselves registered and vote in November.
Right.
That's how it works.
And we have plenty of time to do that.
Right. That's part of the reason why, you and I had a conversation about this. Let's get this out to the people so they're not in a crisis,
I wonder how many people really know that the sign-ups have to be done. I think it's June 10th, June 10th. The people who are running sign up for the office.
Well, I can speak for Ward 7.
Yeah.
I already sent that out to people.
Yeah.
And they said, you're not going to be registering with the city of Nashua. If for the state rep position, you have to register with the Secretary of State.
Right.
And you go on the website, and you have
These are
from
the
June 1st
candidates.
to the 10th.
This is what they have to
And this
do.
is the time frame. The other thing a lot of people didn't know, and we learned this at the 2020 election. If you wait till the last day, you have to go to Concord in person. If you put it in online, it's not going to be accepted, because you have to be vetted.
Yeah.
So you got to do it ahead of time. So yeah, there's a lot of rules.
Well, we'll get through the details. I was just, as you're bringing something up, I know people want to listen a little bit more.
Yep. I hope so. But I think most of the people, when I was campaigning, there was a confusion about the absentee ballot process.
Right.
And some of them asked me if I had an absentee ballot, and I said no. I don't have I can't have an absentee ballot, but I have an application. Oh, you need an Yes, I said this process for absentee ballot is well controlled by the city.
Right.
You have to send in an application. You have to have a legitimate reason why, and the whole process is monitored. So that ballot that you send in filled out is a legitimate ballot, and it gets counted. And there was this confusion between an absentee ballot and a mailed ballot.
Yeah.
And I said, a mailed ballot in the state of New Hampshire is not going to happen.
No.
because there's no chain of custody on that ballot.
Right.
People were filling them out in other states and multiple and doing. We don't do that here.
Right.
Ours is tightly controlled. And I said I was at the polls in 2020 for the whole time when they opened to when they closed, and I'm very comfortable with what was going on there.
Yeah.
So
I was too in
Yep.
Ward 1.
Yep.
But the other thing is they can go to the clerk and get an absentee ballot.
Yes,
That
they can
way.
go in person and get one.
Right.
Yep.
I can
And you
get
can do
that
the
out.
same thing. So the other piece of this is, which is covered in the module, I think it's module 2. People didn't understand you can actually register to vote absentee. You can get an application and send it in. You don't have to go
Right.
to
Either
City
way.
Hall.
Yeah, either way.
You can do it with a absentee voter registration. But again, you have to get an application and
And get them mailed in
right,
time.
Right. Yeah, there's a time frame for it, so you got to follow the rules.
Yeah.
And I think if people get accustomed to going on to the NashuaNewHampshire.gov website, you can go in there and get all the information you want, and that's referenced in here as well, of where to get information and what website to go to.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's a lot of information. I've compressed it as best I could. Most of the modules, the module 1, 2, and 3, average about 5.5 to 6 minutes. So it's not overwhelming, but it gives a person enough information to say, you know what, this whole voting registration process isn't that difficult. I can do
right.
that.
Oh, yeah.
If you can register a car,
Yeah, you can do that.
you can register to vote.
Right.
That's that simple.
Basically, the same information.
And the third thing that triggered this was when I looked at the number of people eligible to vote and the number of people registered to vote. And I was like, and this is total,
Yeah.
not party specific. It's just the total number of people. It just baffled me why that many people would not exercise their right to vote,
Right.
yet loudly complain when they don't get what they want.
Right. Right.
So, and that's in there too.
Okay,
So,
we're going to find out how many people are just a little lazy about voting.
well, I don't know that it's a case of lazy. I didn't hear much of that, but I think it's more they just didn't have the confidence to go do it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like, it just seems confusing and, even the voting process. And hopefully this takes some of that anxiety and confusion out of it.
Well, I can see a number of the people who are elderly and maybe live in assisted living to having some problems, but you handle that. You can handle that with absentee ballots.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, there were 4 facilities in Ward 7 where we put the absentee application and handed it to the administration and said,
This is for your people.
If you got citizens in here that aren't voting and would like to, they can vote and they can't get to the polls. That's a legitimate reason.
Right.
Fill out the application, send it into the city. You got like 12 more days. Don't wait and make sure they get their vote. So.
Okay, so that's explained more in the other information.
Yep.
And what else do you want to tell them?
Make a good selection and cast your ballot.
Okay.
And one of the other things that came up, although wasn't at the top of the priority list, was the time it takes. So I actually went through the whole step of what does it really take to go to City Hall and register to vote?
Yeah.
It takes less time to register to vote than it took me to drive to and from the City Hall.
Yeah.
So it's
real quick.
It's not difficult.
Unless you wait till the end when there's a line.
Right. And the other part of it is the voting time.
Yeah.
So even in a municipal election and a national election at the same time in 2020,
Right.
I went to the polls and I voted. I voted in peak time, and the whole process took me 19 minutes.
They're fairly efficient, aren't they?
They're incredibly efficient.
Yeah.
Even in peak time, the longest wait was, and it had nothing to do with the people running Ward 7 polls.
Yeah.
It had to do with the people going to vote unprepared. There were people fumbling around for their ID. They had to leave and go get it. That's what slows everything down. It's not the people running the polls.
So your information there goes through the steps and say, "Hey, this is what you should be ready to do
Right.
When you go in to vote."
Preparation to vote.
Yeah.
Know who you're going to vote for. Bring
Right.
your documents with you. Go through all of that stuff. It's very efficient. The line moves very quickly. Especially, I mean, this in 2020, for whatever reason, it was extremely warm the days before the election and extremely warm the days after. But that one day, oh yeah, it was in the 40s and the wind was blowing out of the
right.
north and people were standing in line and it was only like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So even in worst case scenario, it's not really a long time.
Well, so it's not hard. You all you want is identification, and they go to the checklist to see if you're on the list.
Right.
And you get a piece of paper and you go
Yeah.
do your voting.
Yeah, once you're inside, it's
Yeah.
it's
1, 2,
quick,
3.
and if you're prepared, the line moves rather quickly. So, yeah, I would encourage everybody to exercise your right to vote and get to the polls in November, and let's get this done.
Well, is there anything that they should do about? You're going to talk about how you evaluate the different people who are running. So when people decide who to vote for.
Yeah. So again, this is more generic, so it doesn't really get into the specifics about anybody's politics. But you have to go in and take a look at the candidates. And what I typically do is I take a look at what's important. I've got grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. So I'm not only looking out for me, I'm looking out for them. And when you're looking at a state rep, once they're elected, they represent more than just Ward 7. Their vote represents most of the state, if not all. So when I look at it, I look at a candidate and say, these are my values. This is what I think is important for my family directly, and my children, my grandchildren, and my great-grandchildren. What do I want? What's the future going to look like for them if I vote correctly? It's going to look good. But that's my opinion, and that's how the system works. So I take a look at what's important, and then what election I'm in, right? If I'm in a municipal election, my children don't live in Nashua. So I take a look at what's important for me, my wife, and our
state,
in our community, in our city, right? Because the city election affects me directly and everybody else in the city. When you get to the state election, it's a little broader, correct? So I take a look at the rest of the family that lives in other communities around. And then for the national election, I take a look at what's going to affect our nation in its entirety and what's important to me and the rest of the family, and that's how I vote. And I take a look at that, and then I compare the candidates. You're never going to find the perfect candidate. It's not possible, right? But you got to take a look at those candidates that are going to deliver the best results for you at the things that are most important. And you can't have 10, 12, 15 important things. So instead of the trivial many, I look at the vital few, and say, if I can hit these 3 or 4, I'm good. I can deal with the rest of it myself. So, and that's it's not a difficult process. It's all kitchen table issues.
That's right.
So to that point, let me share something with you. I think I have this sheet here with me. There was a review we did. I don't think I have it. Yeah, I do. So there was a review that we did. I think it was probably back in October, November, prior to the municipal election, and then following it thereafter. And so this is a question people need to think about. What do most families require from their government, whether it be city, state, or federal? They need security, stability, and certainty. It's that simple. I boiled it right down to those 3 things. And then I said, so you need to ask yourself this question. Does the current local, state, and federal government provide any of these requirements? If not, they are responsible and accountable to provide all three. So if you're looking at state, city, state, and local government, this applies. And then, what do most families need to succeed? They need economically safe and secure environment. They need to have physically safe and secure. They need to feel physically safe and secure. And lastly, the opportunity to secure their future. If these are not difficult things to figure out, and if the candidate you're looking at isn't providing that, then you need to look at another candidate. And I think for this time around, I'm finding that people are very concerned about this physically safe and secure.
Definitely.
There's a lot going on, and I'm hearing it on both sides, that they don't really feel that their current environment is safe and secure, and they don't feel that they're economically safe and secure.
You're right. There's so many things happening out there that the people have to try to pick somebody.
And lastly, I stated that if the government provided security, stability, and certainty, families would have the opportunity to achieve economical, physical safety, and security on their own. That's how it's supposed to be, right? Americans are self-reliant.
Right.
They're very resilient. They can do this as long as the environment is there for them to succeed. That's not difficult. And it says opportunity is the best way to move the needle in your favor. If you want to achieve economical and physical safety, vote for candidates that support stability, certainty, and security in their government.
Good.
The recipe is not difficult.
No.
And that's really how people should be thinking about how do I vote.
Most of the people in our state are friendly enough and working together. A lot of them like to be neighborly, I guess might say.
I would agree. When I campaigned, I forget the number. It was in the thousands of doors I knocked myself. And I had one individual, one out of thousands, that I said to myself, I just need to walk away. This is not going to be a good conversation.
Right, yeah.
So as far as neighborhoods and people, I can only speak for Ward 7, but I can tell you this. Either side, they were the nicest people I ever spoke with. Very warm, very understanding. We had great conversations. I asked for their vote. Depending on the party, I may not have gotten it, but they were still nice people. And
you're right.
Yeah, and
I've done that too.
It was thousands of doors, literally thousands.
Well, before we end this, I just wanted to remind the people that this year also there was a redistricting.
Yep.
You want to just say a word on that and what they should do, because some wards have a few different streets now, or some gained and some left, as we try to even it out.
Right. So I went online Thursday and took a look to see because we're going to have to obviously everybody's going to start managing their campaigns. So I took a look again to see if the new maps were available, and they're not. But as soon as they are, and we've got time.
Yeah.
As soon as they are, you need to go on the nationalnewhampshire.gov. It'll have posted the new redistricting map, and it'll give you you put in you can look for your address, and it'll tell you the ward you're in.
Yeah.
For most in Ward 7, there's just a handful of people that it changed. It's basically where the Hudson Bridge on the northeast side, that was redistricted over. So there's a couple of apartment buildings and some private residences that were affected, and I think another corner. So it's not very many.
Just a couple of streets, but it's something that the voters going to want to figure out, so they go to the right place.
Right. So it'll tell you what ward you're in and where you should be voting, and if it changes, it's automatic anyway.
Right.
You're going to be re-registered in your new ward. So,
right.
Yeah, they can go online and do it.
Okay.
That shouldn't be a hindrance to going to vote or registering.
Okay, and the audience should really know that we're trying to do this for everybody, even though it's just a Republican club. You can look at our website for some of this information, or you can look in the city regulations if you want to go through them. If you want to interested in running for anything, let us know. If you're interested in helping some of the candidates, because all these candidates, don't forget, for $100 a year, they're
you're not going to get
a
rich.
lot of work for the state reps. So they need the help, either by donation or by just physical labor in doing some of the things to get to the word out of why they think they can do something good for you. So listen in. We'll be back again with Charlie in a couple of weeks to explain this.
Okay.
And, we'll keep on going during, we'll introduce some of the people on the shows here too, so that they have a chance of talking to our audience, the voters.
Thank you, Carl.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Take care.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.